Kelly, have you ever been to Brazil?
No, I've seen the movie Brazil and I like it, but I've never been to Brazil.
See what a good guy I am? That could have been a Brazilian intro, but I didn't do that.
Yeah, I was off balance. I was like I'm waiting for it. So
Personal
nicely done.
growth
Yeah.
shows how I've matured. And you can join us in maturing by making sure you're checking out this episode of Bog Panda. I am Dr. Mike at Official Pagan on everything, and joining me as always.
Hi everybody, this is Kelly at KELLYTHOL on Twitter and Instagram. And we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment and subscribe to the Bog Panda YouTube channel. Check out a few videos, leave some comments. Like or two is always appreciated. Maybe buzz by and check our merchandise. And of course, when you're on the Bog Panda YouTube channel, head down to that Hard No playlist and start to enjoy the world's shortest podcast, Hard No.
Yes. And if you don't know what a Brazilian is, just Google it. Nothing can go wrong.
Absolutely not.
So the reason that we bring up Brazil is we're going to talk a little bit about Tectoy. Now, Kelly, are you familiar with Tectoy?
Not until this came up as a show idea, but then I did a little bit of research, so I started to learn a little bit more. I think I had heard of their work because when you start to hear about Sega Genesis and its history and its longevity in certain parts of the country, South America comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably mainly what especially, retro gaming fans here know them for. So they picked up the Sega Master System and eventually the Sega Genesis and extended the already ridiculously long life of those systems even further in South America. There's a misconception that in South America that newer game consoles weren't available, and that's not the case. Part of the reason that those systems are available for so long is they could be manufactured locally by Tectoy, who were licensing everything from Sega, which made them reasonably priced for people. Whereas importing newer systems, whether it was a PlayStation or a Nintendo 64 or whatever would have been around that time, were insanely expensive because of the import taxes and things like that. So this was a way for people to get gaming consoles. It was a way for Sega to extend the lives of these consoles. Tectoy was still making games, officially licensed games for the Master System well into the 90s, a system that came out in the early 80s. That was the system Nintendo put NES out to compete with, and then they put out Genesis to compete with NES. And they kept the Genesis lifespan going way beyond the support that Sega actually gave it here or in Japan. That's what introduced me to them. Was actually they were putting out some really interesting late in the game ports like Duke Nukem for Sega Genesis, a Duke Nukem 3D game. And while it's obviously significantly pared down. It's only one of the episodes of Duke Nukem 3D, and it's missing a lot of detail and stuff. It runs really well for 16-bit hardware, and at that point, ancient 16-bit, ancient from a technology standpoint, 16-bit hardware at a time when you could get Duke Nukem on, any other system at that point. PlayStation was the dominant force at that time in gaming, and they're still putting out Genesis and even Sega Master System stuff. At some point, they switched over to doing plug and play consoles, still doing Master System and Genesis. And now it looks like they're taking over the AtGames market there again because they have this infrastructure where they can manufacture things locally so they don't need to be imported. And looking up Tectoy stuff because I was looking for some other interesting games. I'm a fan of their Mortal Kombat ports, their Duke Nukem port. I saw that you can get the AtGames Core as the Tectoy Core now in Brazil.
Yeah, which involved the putting the somewhat garish Tectoy logo. Basically, it looks exactly like AtGames Core with this bright orange Tectoy branding at the bottom of it. Yeah, it looks like AtGames, although they're actually doing they have been doing, it looks like, over the years, partnerships with a lot of folks, including Fisher Price. They did a little bit with Disney, certainly Sega, AtGames now. So they seem to be a very creative company and building the right kind of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have worked with a lot of other companies. Again, the local major manufacturer of electronics. So if you want to release your products in Brazil, working with them makes sense. If you want to kind of get a foothold in that market for retro gaming, of course, Sega Genesis and now AtGames. I am curious. I didn't see, or at least that, I'm sure I could research this deeper, and maybe we should reach out to Tectoy because I'm sure they want that Bog Panda bump, obviously. So maybe we could reach out to them to kind of get a better idea of what's on the Tectoy core, if there's any kind of different games on there. I would love to see if any of their ports made it onto there. They have some really interesting Mortal Kombat ports. Specifically, they were doing Master System ports of Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3 that were never released in North America. Those are really interesting games. And of course, they're very slow and pared down, but it's amazing that they could even get recognizable Mortal Kombat 3 to run on a early 80s 8-bit system.
Yeah, which the core, the AtGames Core will more than match in terms of horsepower.
Of course,
so
yeah.
So we'll have to see. But yeah, it's a real interesting thing. We'll include a link to the Tectoy site. I was a little confused in that the Tectoy site, irritatingly enough, when they were not serving Bog Panda specifically and having everything in English. So
how dare they?
It's just such an offense. But my browser queued me up, and this is where I got mildly confused. It said, "It appears that this page is in Portuguese. Would you like to translate it?" And I said, "Yes." I didn't anticipate getting Portuguese as the language that I was going to have to translate for Brazil, but it does. With the Chrome browser, you can flip it and navigate the site pretty well, and kind of see what's going on their current offerings. But I'm unclear. I'm a lazy American, so I don't know what the currency of Brazil is, and I don't know what the conversion rates are right now. But I think that the core actually goes for a little more if you were to translate it. Not a lot more, but a little more. But it's not carrying all that import baggage that would really drive the price up.
And you heard it here first, people. People of Brazil, Kelly wants you to abandon your language of Portuguese and take up English
For my convenience, please.
for his convenience, his sole personal convenience.
To a site that I'll visit maybe once a year. So if you guys could get on that. I know we're big in Brazil. Really appreciate it.
But yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think the company is really interesting. It's definitely, I don't know enough about the company. So it's definitely something I'd like to delve into deeper. Maybe in future episodes, we can review some of these Tectoy ports that they were doing in the 90s for 8-bit and 16-bit systems and things like that in the late 90s, well into the PlayStation era. So they're interesting games. It seems like a really interesting company. I would definitely like to learn more about them.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds good. And as long as we haven't got off on the wrong foot with Brazil, maybe that'll happen. We'll have to see. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, saying how dare you speak Portuguese in your own country. It's
slightly provocative, but thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bog Panda.